Hi, today I'd like to talk about two problems that I see in our school district. My name is Vinayak Nair, and dear Board of Education, please listen up. So the first problem that I found is sleep. Aw, wow, look at that kid. He looks so peaceful, he's having a great night's rest, and then all of a sudden, sorry, I must have missed a word. It's sleep deprivation. That's the problem here. And notice how deprivation just suddenly comes up and is more like an afterthought. That's a little bit indicative of our current situation, which I'll explain right now. So, we should be. So, if I'm talking about sleep deprivation, it's important to define how much sleep is needed and then how much sleep we're getting, right? So, the National Sleep Foundation, Mayo Clinic, and the CDC all recommend 8 to 10 hours of sleep for teens aged 14 through 17. So that demographic that falls into people who are in high school currently. And the optimal amount of sleep is widely considered to be 9 hours, right? So 8 to 10 hours is recommended, 9 is great, right? Now, based on a 2006 poll conducted by the National Sleep Foundation, it showed that the adolescents' reported amount of sleep that they got on school nights was 45% of them insufficiently getting sleep. They're not getting, their optimal 9 hours. They're not even getting borderline 8 to 9 hours. They're getting less than that, less than 8 hours of sleep, right? Borderline, 31% of them are getting between 8 to 9 hours, and only 20% are getting the optimal amount of sleep, right? And this is based off of a study with 1,602 adolescents. But actually, I was just kidding. That's not true. See, this refers to the study. This is the raw data from the study that the National Sleep Foundation did. And that 45% insufficient thing that I mentioned before, that's actually not true, because that includes 6th to 8th grade, right? And if you look at 6th to 8th grade, you'll see that there are higher proportions of people who are getting optimal amounts of sleep and borderline amounts of sleep compared to those in high school, right? So let's see what happens when we take them out of the equation. All right, now let's put those together. Great. So we've enhanced it, we've put it together, and I want you to pay close attention to these two numbers right here, right? 9th through 12th grade alone, 87% of students are getting less than the optimal 9 hours of sleep, right? We still said 8 hours is okay. 62% of kids, not 45, 62% of kids are getting insufficient sleep, less than 8 hours, right? And, I'm a senior, right? Seniors, less than 9 hours. I'm in that category, 95%. Of course, college apps are hard, and, it takes a lot of time, and I am, pretty overbooked with my time. But the fact that this is still 95% should be a little bit startling, right? And the other thing, did I forget to mention that this was done in 2006? It is no longer 2006. This poll was conducted in 2006. Now it is 2020, right? Almost 15 years have progressed. And, actually, to put that into context, we didn't even have iPhones back then. If we were having 62% of high schoolers with insufficient sleep in 2006, before the iPhone, now we're on like the 12th, or I don't know, Apple keeps releasing the same thing, the 12 Pro Max iPhone, and all it's been doing is it's been keeping us awake longer, right? We have apps, we have so many things that keep us distracted, so many different factors competing for our attention as technology has advanced, right? Everything is trying to get a bite out of our time. Social media, the new update just came, whatever, right? And it's just taken away a lot of the time that we used to spend for sleeping, right? That's one factor. Another factor is our culture. Sleep is for the weak, right? Margaret Thatcher famously stated, "Sleep is for wimps." And this is not just a product of the last 15 years. Gradually over time, you've seen that there has been a cultural shift in how we perceive sleep, right? Only recently, very recently, have we begun to realize, hey, sleep might actually be kind of good for us, and maybe we shouldn't talk about it in such a derisive tone, with such a derisive tone. And the problem with this, the problem of having all this technology, advancing at a super fast rate, and the culture of anti-sleepness, that has allowed for the normalization of and the acceptability of getting like less than 7 hours, getting less than the optimal 9 hours of sleep. Even before this AP Psych unit about sleep and consciousness, I used to think that getting 7 hours of sleep was a good thing. And I know for a fact that many of my peers think so too, right? So this has led to a normalization which is actually severely, in the long run, going to hurt us, right? So I've mentioned that sleep deprivation is very prominent, right? And you might be already convinced that, this is bad for us, but in case you aren't, let me fill you in on some of the symptoms. So why is this a problem? So sleep deprivation, more specifically chronic sleep deprivation, that's where you're repeatedly, day after day, not getting the sleep your body needs, especially if you are 14 to 17, that is associated with drowsy driving, right? Now, a select portion of our students, 17 through 18, even actually if you include 16, because that's when you can get a permit, they are susceptible to drowsy driving. And you put together inexperience and you couple that with chronic sleep deprivation, you give them a car, you put them on the road, that's a recipe for disaster, right? We are pretty much just sitting ducks waiting for the next car accident to happen, honestly. The next thing is chronic sleep deprivation is associated with depression, right? It's like bidirectional, depression and anxiety. It's bidirectional. So chronic sleep deprivation has been known to be a contributing factor to depression, and depression has also been a contributing factor. Depression and anxiety have been contributing factors to sleep deprivation. So it's a vicious cycle, right? And part of the reason why this is because when you are depressed, it is a disease, right? It changes physically how your brain, is structured, and you are with when you're going through those therapies, right? CBT or IPT, you're trying to rework those connections, right? To get rid of this disease. And when you're not sleeping enough, you are literally not allowing your body to change those connections, right? So no wonder depression and anxiety are going to persist. Another thing is that chronic sleep depression is associated with obesity. Yes, you might not think this to be true. I didn't think this was true, but it is. If you are not getting enough sleep, that is going to release more of the hunger hormone, which is known as ghrelin, and that's going to make you want to crave things like carbohydrates when you actually don't need them at that time. And so you're going to eat more and more things likely that aren't good for you. And so there is a higher risk of becoming obese. Memory loss, right? As I mentioned, your brain is making connections. In the case of memory, you're making, during your REM sleep, rapid eye movement, you are literally, reshuffling the events of the day. You are forming memories and connections through them. When you've learned a concept in class and you discussed it, you did some examples, that's fine and all. But a lot of the work actually comes in during sleep time, because that's during your bedtime, because that's when your mind is actively going through that stuff and trying to form connections, right? And it's actually building and it's creating these memories, long-term memories that you can access and use and retrieve in the future. So when you don't sleep enough, when you deprive yourself of sleep, you are becoming susceptible to memory loss. The final thing is neurological illness. If you do not sleep enough, there has been research There was a 2013 TED Talk about this, where there's research showing that you are more susceptible to developing Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And that's because when you sleep, the cerebrospinal fluid that's surrounding your brain is actually going through the is going through the upper layers, and it's cleaning together all the waste that's between the cells, right? And one particular waste in the brain is this chemical called beta amyloid. And so when you have a buildup of that, you are making yourself susceptible, and there's a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, right? So by literally sleeping a little bit more, right, on a regular basis and getting that 9 hours of sleep that you need, you can actively prevent this. But instead, we choose not to. We choose to dismiss it as a second thought, and we choose that it's just not that important, right? The sources for these explanations and these causes are from the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and many, many others, like the Stanford School of Medicine, and those and sources I'll get to at the very end. So the second problem that we have on our hand is mindfulness, right? I like this comic. You can just, look at it for yourself. I'm sure you guys know what mindfulness is actually about. By mindfulness, I mean not this mindfulness stuff where your mind is constantly trying to juggle like 30 different things at the same time. You can see this car, people, everything's kind of going on there. And here, everything is very peaceful and quiet. I just really like this comic, and I hope you do too. So, my question really with mindfulness is why not, right? If you don't know, mindfulness is basically the practice. The founder of mindfulness, Jon Kabat-Zinn, he basically coined it as paying attention very, very selectively, right? It's all about paying attention. And you are essentially trying to isolate certain parts of our bodies and trying to isolate our minds from all the stress and all the worries and all the things in the past and the future that we are worrying about, and really just paying attention in the moment, right? So it boosts your focus naturally. That makes sense, right? And if you've tried it out for yourself, I can't guarantee it, but I think it's pretty likely that you're going to see that it'll boost your focus, right? Now, mindfulness is like a skill, so it has to be practiced over time. And another benefit of practicing the skill is that it is linked with reducing depression and anxiety. Now, there is, if you saw, there is a little asterisk here. And that's because there isn't like a ton of research done around mindfulness. Once again, society doesn't value mindfulness or sleep. It's not a huge priority, right? And so it struggles to get the funding that it deserves, right? But it has been linked in certain studies with depression and anxiety, but there need to be more to make it more conclusive, right? So there is a little bit of limited research around this area, and I'll acknowledge that, right? But there also are studies by Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard University showing that mindfulness is associated with it is associated with thickened cortical substances, and basically what it does is it improves your attention and your sensory processing, right? So that is what mindfulness has been pretty much proven to do, and that I think is good enough to sort of try to introduce a little bit of a mindfulness curriculum in our classes, right? Now, mindfulness, as doing mindfulness practice, you need millions of dollars, a special facility built up, whole building. I'm kidding. You don't need any of that. I think you need maybe to download Headspace, maybe get the free version, maybe get the premium version if you want it, and just start listening, right? So mindfulness is not something crazy, crazy hard to implement, right? And it's actually been done before. And it's been done right by certain organizations like Mind Up and Mindful Schools, right? So we can look at them as a model for how to implement mindfulness in the classroom, right? And in some classrooms, it is actually used as opposed to detention, right? And it makes sense, right? Mindfulness is sort of a buffer between, it's like a little waiting area between your stimulus or whatever has happened to you and your reaction, right? So let's say Billy hit me in the elbow. Instead of taking the time, instead of impulsively punching him in the face, right, and then getting sent to detention, where I'm told that, hey, you're wrong, you better learn from your mistakes and right your wrongs. Instead of doing that, where one possible outcome is maybe I get scared straight, I decide never to do it again. A very, plausible outcome of going to detention is Billy just realizes that the system is messed up and even the school is against him now, right? When maybe in actuality they aren't. They want to foster growth and they want him to succeed. So instead of doing that, instead of using detention, which is like a punishment, right, meant to, change students' views of their actions through just pure punishment, mindfulness basically teaches the kids, hey, think about what you're doing before you do it, right? And through a lot of practice, you sort of create that little bit of a buffer between between the actions that happen to you and your reactions, right? So it has been shown to work, and it has been used as opposed as an alternative to detention. So I get it, right? I've just shown you two problems, and I've talked about why they're so bad. But everything. There's always a problem, right? There are always so many problems. We are literally living in a global pandemic, right? I think that's redefined at the very least what it even means to have a problem, right? And so I know, like, if I had to put myself in your shoes as a member of the Board of Education, we are living in a time where everything is uncertain and people are desperate for answers, especially parents, right, who are concerned for the safety, well-being, and education of their children. And a lot of these shots have to be made in the dark. And on top of that, there might be more pressing things, and this might not be super relevant to the current day, right? These issues. So let's talk about priorities in our schools and in the world, right? So right now, everybody's really stressed out, right? Students, admins, teachers. But instead of just dismissing this thing, right, and saying, okay, we'll put it out later, right? We're too stressed out. We have all of this work, right? I think we should use this uncertainty, this really uncertain time period that we're in, COVID, to try and experiment with some changes and use that as an opportunity, right? So, yes, everybody is stressed out. There's a lot of different things going on. But the reason why I think making these changes now is the most beneficial is because right now, everybody's talking about the new normal, right? We will go back to a system that will likely not look like the one that previously, will not look like what it was pre-COVID. And so this is a great time to introduce that because, now, this is a great time to introduce that. Because people aren't expecting it to be super normal when you go back, right? It's just a little bit of thinking that kind of occurred to me that, hey, if there's any time at all that you're going to try to implement this, I think you should do it after, we've seen that. I don't think, and many other people agree, that this virtual model is not 100% working, right? And people are still somehow in their own homes still waking up groggily to the Zoom classes first thing in the morning, and half of them don't even have their camera on, right? So I think this would be, at the very least, a little bit better than that, right? So I want to just bring you to the mission statement of our school, right? If I haven't convinced you yet that this is a priority, right? And what, this district is about, right? Our mission is to empower all learners to thoughtfully contribute to a diverse and changing world with confidence, strength of character, and love of learning, right? I want you to look at two specific parts. Empower all learners to thoughtfully contribute. Thoughtfully contribute, not be mindful robots. We want people who are critically thinking, who feel energized to make the changes they want to see in the world, right? And you can't do that without getting the adequate amount of sleep, right? Because then you're dealing with all the grogginess, and it's a lot harder to do. And you're also neglecting those kids who may be suffering from depression or anxiety. Instead of curtailing that, you're actually exacerbating it by having these super late start times. And also, love of learning. I mean, that's just, in my view, a little, that's just common sense because, would you rather have somebody in your classroom who is just really, really tired and they didn't get enough sleep and they don't really care about learning, they just kind of want to get through the day, versus somebody who's had their basic needs fulfilled and is choosing to learn more about something that they can benefit from, right? And actively learning, right? So, two parts of our mission statement that I think we should pay a little bit more attention to. So, this is my proposal, right? In order to fix the current system. So, what I am proposing is, I'll break this into two parts, right? Stuff that we've done before and then new things that we want to introduce. So the first thing is we're going to maintain that rotating block system. It's beautiful. I like the rotating block system. It's intuitive. It makes sense. The current system that we have over Zoom, I don't understand it. I have never literally understood, what class goes after what, because there's no real discernible pattern. So I just open Genesis every day. Whereas this is more intuitive. We're going to keep the 5 minutes between classes. It's good. It gives people a chance to get where they need to go, maybe catch a breath. And then lunch, we're going to do we're going to do in between the day, right? So 3 classes before and 3 classes after. Now I'd like to talk about some of the new changes that I'd like to see implemented. So the first thing is we would like to do 50-minute classes, right? So 50-minute classes. I'll explain why and why I think the trade-off is justified a little bit later, but that is the first change. The second change is we want to have later start times. So we will begin at 9 a.m. and end by 3, actually that should say 3:50 p.m., right? So really 3:50 p.m., it's just 1 hour later than what it used to be, whereas instead of waking up at 7:40, we're waking up at 9, right? There are also 2 buffers, and those are 15 minutes each. And now I'd like to explain what the buffers are and why I think it justifies the trade-off for these 50-minute classes that we have. So, by the way, if you didn't see, this is HCO3 bicarbonate. That's a chemistry joke. It's a buffer in the blood. It keeps the pH. But, other than that, what do I mean by buffers, right? So I mentioned how we want to integrate, how, a great thing to do would be to integrate a mindfulness curriculum and have 50-minute classes. So how does that play in? So during these buffers, right, this is an optional time period from 9 to 9:15 and from 12:55 to 1:10. This is an optional amount of time. You do not have to come in to class at this time, right? After lunch, you can just chill out at lunch if you want, but what we are offering at these times is a designated place for practicing the things that we described, like mindfulness and meditation, and you try to make that happen in those 15 minutes in the AM and the PM. And the reason why there's 2 is because in the morning, in addition to doing that, this is also a great opportunity to build your class culture, right? And engage in some more social, emotional learning, right? So during these 15 minutes, it should be strictly mandated that this time should not be used for anything academic. No coursework, no tests, no homework, nothing of that sort, nothing of that variety will go on in these 15 minutes. That is purely dedicated for social, emotional learning and building class culture. And what do I mean by building class culture? Suppose that our virtual learning model has to exist, right? Suppose that this virus, just stays around for a really, really long time, or whatever the case may be. It is very difficult, I have noticed, to build a class culture. And I don't have a class. I have peer groups that I host with, as a peer leader. It's very difficult to build a culture there, right? It almost just feels like we're going through the material. We're not really actually engaging any further as a class, right? I think that the side conversations that we have, the little tangents that we go on, those are actually essential to having a fun and open environment, right? Where people are, they don't just see you as a teacher, they see you as a friend, as somebody you can reach out to. And that, I think, eliminates some of the barriers when you're asking for help or trying to clarify your understanding of something without a fear of feeling dumb when you ask questions, right? You could also see this PM buffer as an extra time for eating, right? So let's say there are transportation issues, whatever. There's like an extra 15-minute buffer here, and you can use that if you would like, right? But this AM buffer, what essentially would look like in the PM buffer is the teacher would open their Zoom at 9 and 12:55 a.m. respectively, and that would stay for 15 minutes where students would just pop in, have a mindfulness thing, chat a little bit, and just get to know their teachers, right? I think colleges, realize there's colleges when they market, they've realized that there is a lot of learning that happens outside of the classroom. And it is important to sort of leverage that and tap into that to, create an environment where people are the most conducive to learning, right? So I know I put, this, bicarbonate ion here as a joke, but really I want to show that this, is just as important as this, right? Which is about practicing mindfulness, social emotional learning, and building a class culture. So now I'd like to talk about a case study of a district pushing their waking times later, right? So this is I shouldn't say Michigan. I keep forgetting. I keep blurring the lines between the two. This should say Minnesota, right? This is what happened. There was a case study of 9,000 students in 8 public schools across, and they examined the effects of changing the opening time to a little bit later, right, at 9 a.m. And so this is one of the comparisons that they saw, right, which was an increase, decrease, or not a statistically significant change in GPA, right? So if you are taking the humane element out of, getting some good night's sleep, then at least look at the numbers with respect to GPA. In these schools, I believe there wasn't data collected for the other two, you can see that generally there was an increase in GPA across grade levels, right? Now, you might be seeing this increase, decrease. That's because they took data from different different subjects, right? So different departments like science and English and math. And in some of them, some departments increased while others decreased. But you can see here that, for the most part, a lot of it is an increase, right? If you take it out of the equation, the humane aspect of letting kids sleep and preventing neurological illness, obesity, mental illnesses, at least you can see that there is a likelihood, right, that is significant, that GPA will increase overall, right? So what we saw is, in addition to GPA, they measured other factors. They measured, academic performance, but they also measured attendance and amount of sleep, which are all things that went up. And as I mentioned, drowsy driving and the tardiness rate, those were all factors that went down, right? As a result of just, pushing the start time back a little bit. And this is not the only change. There have been other changes. There was a bill that was passed in California by Gavin Newsom to mandate that no schools can start after 8. No public schools, can start before 8 a.m. And that is a pretty broad action that's happening across all the public schools in California. So understandably there would be some controversy and some backlash. But what I'm saying is, aligning with those WWP values that I've established, it really is in line with what we're about. And I think it shouldn't be that ridiculous that this proposal is on the table, right? So I am going to move on to this slide, stop sleeping, it's time to wake up, right? This has pretty much been my presentation. Dear Board of Education, I hope you can see what's going on. And you got to stop sleeping on this issue. I'm kidding. I don't want to end on such a sour note. I would just say please consider some of these changes, right? If not all of them, but I know that may be a little bit unrealistic. So please at least consider some of them. And thank you for your time. The link to this presentation is on the screen, so you can pause it and take it, if you would like. And it basically on the footnotes for each slide, on the speaker notes, there are the sources that I used, and you can check that out at your leisure. But that is all that I have for now. And yeah, thank you so much once again for your time. And yeah, have a nice day. All right, bye.